neoliberals out there, this means that Carl knows who he is, and that he is unashamed to be on a first-name basis with God. Now, here's Carl Gallups.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, here's Carl Gallups, and here's you, and that's the most important person in the room, you. The next most important person in the room is Mike Zullo, the former lead investigator of the Obama fraud case under Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. And Mike's been on this show for years, off and on. And so, Mike, you were right in the middle of your account, this brand new breaking information that's just so odd that all of this is coming up now. I mean, to me, Mike, it almost sounds like a deep state operation. With operatives involved, because you and I have been, I'm just going to use the targets, the subjects, even the victims of that for years. And I'm not accusing these guys of doing that. I'm not. But I'm just saying it had that feel to it when you and I were first exposed to this dialogue on this show, on Dr. Janda's show. But bottom line, you were talking about Wiebe and Benny and Drake, former NSA guys and whistleblowers, and you were talking about their characterization of Montgomery in the beginning. Because they looked at some hard drives with you under legal auspices, and you all determined that those hard drives pretty much had junk on them. But the thumb drives that you had and other information that Montgomery had given you that's now breaking in the headline news right now helps you to understand and helped you to know all of these years that even though Montgomery, he's a person, he's a human being, and he probably was in this for himself, to cover himself, to protect himself, maybe to make himself look good. I mean, a lot of these brainiacs, are like that, and you knew that. You were not played by him at all. I can remember you calling me confidentially and telling me these things over the years. So that's not the point. The point is you knew that a lot of the stuff that Montgomery had was number one, grade A, good information that was mind-blowing, regardless of the junk he gave you. That's to be expected. But the problem is that these three guys wrote a report basically condemning Montgomery altogether because of the hard drives when you knew better. But now, just in the past couple of weeks, these guys have reversed their position publicly, and they're now saying, oh, yeah, Montgomery's, he's good. He's good to go. We need to get an investigation. He needs to have his story told. He needs to be brought forward. Man, let's go all the way with Montgomery. Rah, rah, rah. And you're saying, wait a minute. This stinks to high heaven. What's this flip-flopping back and forth on Montgomery? Now pick it up from there and correct anything I said that's wrong.
No, you're 100% right. And on this Janda broadcast, what ends up surfacing is there is a line of questioning that Mr. Janda goes down, which eerily reminds me of when a prosecutor, a dishonest prosecutor, wants to paint a picture that doesn't really exist. You ask bullet point questions and you get a desired response.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And what ends up coming out in this is they believe Montgomery is creditable. But it's not because he's creditable as a whole. They believe he's creditable because he worked for the agency as a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And they point to a document that was exercised against Montgomery when he was in a court trial, a civil trial, I believe back in 2006. He was in a dispute with one of the businesses that he was partnered in developing these kinds of software products. And the government came in that civil trial, and they issued against him what is called the state secrets privilege, which means he cannot testify because he knows things that we need to protect, threats to national security.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Wiebe and Benny claim that they're just hearing about this. However, Brian Makowitz and I know different because in our very first initial meeting with them, we laid out Montgomery's tale of woe because he has some unscrupulous things written about him and some behaviors in the past that are problematic towards his credibility.
Sure.
But we always pointed to this fact that the federal government would never come in and issue a state secret privilege on someone if they didn't have reason to. In other words, that in and of itself tells you that he isn't lying about working for them, and he isn't lying that he knows things or possibly has information because they sapped him like that.
Right.
So going forward with this, it's becoming evident to me that they're saying, that we left out information, and now based on that information, They're changing their conclusion on Montgomery instead of being a fraudster. Possibly he has some good information.
Yeah, and you never left out
the
any
rub with
information.
No, and the rub with that is that has no bearing on what we asked them or tasked them to do, which is look at this information that's being provided, this evidence, and tell us if there's anything in here that's concerning,
Right.
which there wasn't.
Right.
So to jump to a conclusion about a man's character
Right.
tells me that you polluted yourself by going online and looking up what other people have written about this guy.
Yes. Yes.
And that just taints the whole thing.
Yes. And you would
But
think.
the bottom line to the hard...
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Carl.
Nope, go ahead. Keep going. Bottom line.
The bottom line to the hard drives is this. Obviously, this was a tremendous blow to the investigation. Obviously, it ruffled feathers really badly at the sheriff's office. I mean, when I went to Arpaio and told him that we're going to do this, I told him we are going to run the risk that this is going to be garbage. And let me just set up a little, narrative for you going, into this. When I came up with this idea, the arrangement I made with Detective Makowitz is we were going to take Montgomery to lunch, and I was going to spring this on him. We had the assistance of Weeby, Drake, and Benny already locked in. We're sitting over lunch. I am diagonally from Montgomery. Brian Makowitz is looking at him face on. And about 30 minutes into this, I hit him with this. And this was planned.
Mm-hmm.
I said, hey, we have an idea. We can get, and I named the players, they are willing to look at your documents. I said, if this hard drive information is what you say it is, you have just wrote your ticket to credibility because he was always trying to make himself credible.
Right.
Well, as I said it, I am watching the back of his neck to the top of his temples turn bright red.
Uh-huh.
And I knew right then and there there's going to be garbage on these hard drives.
Uh-huh.
I also invited him to come with us. And he was agreeing. And when we left the restaurant and dropped him off, I turned to Makowitz and I said, this guy is never going to come with us. This is going to be garbage on these hard drives, and he's going to pull a doctor's excuse that he can't come because he is suffering from a brain aneurysm. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, the closer it gets, all of a sudden the doctor excuse comes out. And I remember needling Brian. I'm going to tell you, Brian, what's next is going to be junk on these hard drives. We go, sure as rain, there is junk on the hard drives.
Uh-huh.
I put a call into Montgomery that very day. We went through them, and I say to him over the phone, Dennis, this was a very bad day for you. And that was planned. That's all I said. All he says in response to me is, can we work this out?
Mm-hmm.
I knew right then and there that he completely played us,
mm-hmm.
that he had no intention of ever giving us anything that was worthwhile. But you have to remember, he had us under this illusion now for almost 8 months,
mm-hmm.
believing there was some super secret information on those drives, and there was absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That destroys your credibility, and the only person that's responsible for that is Dennis Montgomery.
Right.
Now, the thing that prompted this whole Janda interview was some articles written by a Mary Fanning and an Alan Jones. Not Alex Jones, Alan Jones.
Yes, Alan Jones. Yes, I'm familiar
and
with this
in
article.
their articles, what is becoming obvious is there is an attempt to delete the sheriff's office 2-year investigation with Montgomery by omission.
Yeah.
It's deletion by omission.
Yeah.
They pretend like it never even happened.
Yeah. Who are these people?
And that,
I mean, who is this this Alan Jones and Mary Fanning? I recognize those names.
They're two. I can't call. I don't even know. Are they reporters, journalists? I don't know what they are, but they're out of Florida. They write for these blogs. They come up with a lot of this, super secret squirrel stuff. I don't know the motive behind this, other than to believe Montgomery, who since 2013 that I know him, has constantly been trying to get reporters to write positive stories about him.
Right.
And he may have found two that are willing to swallow it all hook, line, and sinker and just do it.
Right.
So those articles are even referred to in the Janda interview that puts Benny and Weeby now in this position to answer questions and provide an illusion that he's all creditable.
Right.
Well, I can't let that happen.
Right.
Number one, there's federal testimony. The things I am telling you about have been turned over to a federal court. The DOJ was in the courtroom. I understand the CIA has looked at some of this. And a year later, Montgomery finally goes to the FBI under Comey and Baker, you'll know those names,
Yep.
and turns over information. I don't know exactly what it was, but what I do know is...
With attorney Larry Klayman.
With attorney Larry Klayman, that I arranged that.
Yes.
I got Montgomery to a federal judge who, using Larry Klayman, and I know once I was going to use Larry Klayman, I was going to lose control of Montgomery as an informant because Klayman was going to become his attorney.
Right.
And I would lose complete control over him. But we needed to get this information to the federal authority. We took him to a federal judge. He produced information to a federal judge. I won't go into what was said in those meetings, but he produced information to a federal judge, and ultimately we finally got Montgomery, who did not want to go to the FBI, because the FBI falsified affidavits and got search warrants on his house, and it was later determined the FBI lied in executing those warrants and had to return everything they took from Montgomery.
You mean Mueller's FBI? You mean
them.
Mueller's FBI lied?
It was Mueller's FBI that lied.
Unbelievable.
And this goes back to something else too, Carl.
Yeah.
All these things that are going on right now, this same players, Mueller, Clapper,
Comey,
and the head of the NSA, CIA, John Brennan.
Yes.
All these players were involved back then.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, in the early 2000s, Montgomery would see Clapper once a week. So nobody can tell me they didn't know what they were doing, because here is where it gets very, very interesting. I believe it was 2005, General Hayden, who was then director of the NSA, is testifying about what I previously told you about Thin Thread.
Right.
And Trailblazer.
Right.
Trailblazer was the violation of Fourth Amendment protections.
Right.
What they were doing is they were taking snippets of these programs and they were sending them out to private contractors. So now these people that don't even really work for the federal government, aren't sworn law enforcement, have access to all kinds of things. God only knows what they've done with this information. But they were sending pieces of this out. As I was dialoguing with Montgomery during the course of this investigation, he had made some statements to me that piqued my curiosity. And after learning about Benny and Drake, I asked him if in his dealings with the government, if they ever gave him any software to run when he was doing the breaching. Now, Montgomery develops the breaching software, not the harvesting software. They're two separate things. The breaching software breaches firewalls and surreptitiously gets into computers and they take it over. The harvesting is just harvesting the blanket information. Now, I asked him, did they ever give you anything? And he sheepishly tells me yes. And I'm like, around what time was that? He goes, 2005, 2006. I said, did they make you sign anything? And he goes, yeah. I go, what was that? He goes, well, they handed me this stuff. They told me to start utilizing it, and they sapped it, special access program. So I didn't even know what that was. I go, what's a special access program? He says, that is something that is so secret that it's even out of the purview of Congress. So now what I'm hearing is I ask him, do you have the source code to this information? And he tells me he does. I said, can you start searching that and let me know if you have anything called Thin Thread? He calls me back in about a half hour, and he says, yeah, there's something in here referencing T-Thread. I said, look and see if you have anything that says Trailblazer. It takes him about 4 or 5 hours, and he calls me back. He says, yeah, I found some stuff in here in the source code about Trailblazer. I said, so they handed you this software to now utilize in your hacking maneuvers that you were doing for their instructions. He said, yes. Now keep in mind, Thin Thread is no Fourth Amendment protection data harvesting.
Right.
As that is unfolding right before my eyes, I start to probe Thin Thread, General Hayden, and I come up, and I remember I'm doing this in 2013. I come up with not only video, but articles and transcripts, which are been scrubbed now off the internet, where the Senate Intelligence Committee is really getting on him about the cost of this Trailblazer program that he was running, and ultimately the government shuts it down.
Wow.
So
Listen. Go ahead. Let's stop it right there. Ultimately, the government shut that down, and they're under the impression. We'll pick it right back up. We got to take a time out. All right, here we are. All right, so hold on. Let me adjust this noise in my headphones. Okay, there we go. Now I'm not screaming at myself. Okay, well, so Mike Zullo, so you left off talking about how they were scrubbing all of this from the internet. And in the meantime, we just got a call from a listener who was telling us that in the last few days, a program called Dark to Light with Tracy Beans, we think it is, or something like that, that she said on her program that Dennis Montgomery has been sending her information just in the last few days. Now, I have no way of verifying that. That just came in by telephone, Mike Zullo, and we can check on that later. But if that's the case, then this listener knows that what you're saying is absolutely correct about what Dennis Montgomery is up to. So talk to us first.
Yeah, that's exactly what he does. It's obviously that Montgomery is now the puppeteer.
Yeah.
And he's using these outlets to send a story out. And to me, that tells me that he's trying to change his history and his narrative.
Yeah.
And he's finding willing people to do that. But, Carl, let me just go back because this is very, very important.
Yes.
When the Intelligence Committee shuts down Trailblazer, I believe it was a $1.2 billion cost. There was money bleeding out all over on this thing. According to the timeline now and the information provided by Montgomery and by his own statements, what appears happened is Congress may have thought they shut it down, but Trailblazer was offloaded to Montgomery as he was working out of a secured area in Reno, Nevada.
Right.
As a subcontractor. It was never shut down.
Right.
It's just out of the purview now because it was sapped.
Yeah, it was smoke and mirrors because the people were getting onto it.
Right. So, this whole discussion is evolving around these parallel clandestine operations that go outside of the NSA.
Yeah.
The NSA, when they do this, there is all kinds of firewalls and protocols and all kinds of records kept. When you go to these outside clandestine sites, there's none of that. There's just a raw collection of data, and no one knows if it's going on still or not. But most likely it is. And that became apparent in our dealings with Montgomery, that this stuff never was shut down.
Yeah.
It was an illusion.
Yeah.
So this is all coming out now as a result of a narrative where, like I say, they try to omit and delete this 2-year span of time that Montgomery was working with the sheriff's office.
Right.
And you have to ask yourself why. Because Montgomery damaged his own credibility with this office. He damaged his own credibility in this investigation. And he's trying to make, or someone is trying to make it seem as if none of that ever happened.
Right. And
you can't get away from that.
Yeah, and Montgomery's probably behind it. And plus, we're right in this whole thing of Donald Trump is now the one in office. Now he's investigating the investigators. Now he's publicly saying this is probably going to go to Obama, to his front doorsteps, to Brennan, his front doorsteps. So I'm sure that Montgomery sees the handwriting on the wall that a lot of the nation's seeing, that probably all of this information that was gleaned during the Obama birth certificate investigation, that's going to come up as well, and Montgomery's name is right in the middle of it.
Well, yes, and here's the thing. What happened with this article and this Janda interview, this is old news made to look like it's new news.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing new about any of this except the omission of the interaction between Montgomery and the sheriff's office and what the sheriff's office did determine.
Right.
And now I'm going to tell you something that is going to, really be mind-boggling to your audience. This is my personal position on this.
Mm-hmm.
Montgomery has a story to tell. Montgomery did work as a contractor for certain agencies. There are court documents that prove it. Montgomery can put together timelines, people, places, and operations. I don't know about the information he gave the FBI, and I don't know anything else that he collected. I know that what I looked at ultimately did come back as verified, and was information that Montgomery himself wasn't even aware that he collected.
Right.
So he has a story to tell, and he should at least be interviewed, not by the FBI, but by some congressional committee, if nothing more than his investigational information. Even though his credibility is so damaged, look, that doesn't mean he isn't party to some facts and truths.
Right.
I mean, the very first pieces of information he gave us was real.
Right.
What he did with those hard drives and stringing us along for 8 months, I don't understand. Is it possible he was afraid to give us that actual information? Yeah, and I was the one that actually proffered that at one point. But in retrospect, as I look at it, when you know we're going to go get it analyzed and you know you're going to get caught, why don't you just come clean and say, hey, look, guys, I didn't give you anything. I'm afraid to. I could have lived with that.
Right.
But when you make us go through the exercise,
right,
that becomes a problem, and that's how you destroy yourself.
Yeah, and that's what he did. Now, listen, Mike, we're at the top of the second hour, so let me just say, when we come back, we're going to open up the phone lines, let you guys call and ask anything or say anything you want. You've got 1 minute to do that, or you can text us at 850-623-1330. But the thing, Mike Zullo, that I want you to address as soon as we come back is the fact that even though he destroyed his credibility concerning those hard drives, he still gave a lot of good, creditable, provable information, and a lot of it is unfolding before our eyes right now, things that he told you. So we'll discuss that when we come back. All right, folks, this is why you listen to Freedom Friday. We'll be right back after this timeout. Please don't go anywhere.
Of the final kingdom.
There's not only things that he didn't know, there are things he still doesn't know.
Didn't know.
Thanks. Not only things that he didn't know, there are things he still doesn't know.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has died, aged 80.
We are with one of Rabbi Kaduri's disciples.
הצלחה רבה, והצלחה רבה ומהירה, בתוך ביאת משיח צדקנו בקרוב ממש, ואז ישפיע זה על כל כדור הארץ. נתנו להשם שמע.